My name is Alexandra Hayes. I'm 29 years old. And until 6 weeks ago, I thought I was in a solid relationship. Not perfect, not storybook, but solid. The kind you invest in, argue through, and believe will hold because you're both standing on the same side of the table. Turns out I was the only one standing there. I met Ethan when we were both 24, fresh out of college, entry-level jobs, cheap coffee, big plans. He was working in marketing for a small agency downtown. I had just landed a junior financial analyst role at a mid-sized investment firm in Chicago. Neither of us had money. We split a studio apartment. We counted groceries. We ate ramen 3 nights a week and told ourselves it was temporary. And for a while it was. We built everything together, or at least that's what I believed back then. We moved in together after a year. Talked about the future like it was a shared project. Marriage. A house. Travel someday, when we could afford it. 2 years later, we were still together. Still committed. Still saying we. And then my career took off. Not overnight, but fast enough that it changed the dynamic before I fully noticed it happening. Senior analyst. Then associate portfolio manager. Then, last year, vice president at 28. The money got good. Really good. We bought a house in Lincoln Park. Cash. I paid off Ethan's car. We upgraded flights. Stopped checking prices. 18 months ago, Ethan quit his job. He said the stress was killing him, that his mental health mattered more than money, that he needed time to figure out what he really wanted to do with his life. I supported him. I told him to take his time, start a consulting business, freelance, reset. He never did. Instead, it was certification after certification, life coaching, breathwork training, then a photography course he swore would change everything. Each one lasted about 2 months. I didn't push. We had the money. I wanted him happy. But about 6 months ago, something shifted. He started criticizing everything. My hours, my friends, the fact that I still drove my paid-off Honda while he drove the luxury SUV I'd bought him. "You make all this money and still dress like you shop at Target," he said once. "I do shop at Target," I replied. "It's efficient." That annoyed him. "You're boring, Alex. You never want to do anything fun. All you care about is work." To him, fun meant $400 dinners and spontaneous weekends in Miami. Trips I paid for while closing deals that kept our lifestyle afloat. 3 months ago, he started going out more. Guys' nights, wellness retreats, a weekend conference in California. When he came back, he was different, distant, restless, talking about finding himself and living authentically. He started guarding his phone, angling it away when I walked by. I asked him twice if something was going on. Both times he said I was paranoid, controlling, projecting my work stress onto him. So I stopped asking. 2 weeks ago, on a Wednesday afternoon, I was in back-to-back meetings. At 2:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, sent from his lawyer's office. "I'm starting the breakup process. You're holding me back from the life I deserve." I read it 3 times. Sitting in my office, door closed, a client portfolio open on my screen. The words didn't feel real, so I replied with the only thing that felt honest. Understood. I set my phone face down on my desk, finished my workday. What Ethan didn't know was that I planned for contingencies for a living. And for the past 2 months, since his behavior changed, I'd been quietly preparing. Not because I wanted to end things, but because I refused to be blindsided. That night, I went home to a quiet house. Ethan had taken some clothes, his laptop, a few framed photos. He left his key on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation, just absence. I sat at the kitchen table long after the sun went down, staring at that key like it was evidence from a crime scene. And then I opened my notebook. Because while Ethan was busy finding himself, I had been paying attention. 6 weeks earlier, when the criticism turned sharp, when the secrecy started, I'd called my sister, Claire. She's 33, a tax attorney in Boston. Brilliant. Precise, unemotional in the way only people who understand numbers and law can be. She'd never liked Ethan, not openly, not dramatically, just quietly wary. "He's drifting," she told me back then, and drifting people tend to grab on to whoever's holding the rope. That night I called her again. "He did it," I said. "Did what?" "He sent the text from a lawyer's office." There was a pause. Then, "Okay, are you ready to move forward with what we discussed?" "Yes." Claire had already walked me through the reality of an Illinois separation. Community property state. Anything acquired during the relationship, assets, savings, property, gets split 50-50 unless there's a prenup. We didn't have one. Ethan had cried when I brought it up years ago, said it meant I didn't trust him. I'd dropped it, a mistake I wouldn't repeat. But here was the technicality Claire drilled into me. Community property applies to assets that exist at the time of division. And Ethan hadn't served papers yet. He'd announced his exit by text. I pulled out a clean page and started listing everything. The house, $1.2 million, paid off. His SUV, $85,000. My Honda, $8,000. Checking, $47,000. Savings, $180,000. Investments, $290,000. Retirement, $175,000. Just under $2 million. Most of it earned in the last 3 years. Years I paid for everything. Years Ethan didn't work. I felt something then, not rage. Clarity. By Friday, everything was in motion. The trust. Irrevocable. Claire as trustee. Me as beneficiary. On paper, I owned nothing. The house transfer alone took days. Appraisals, filings, taxes. $40,000 in fees and penalties. Worth every cent. My Honda, the only thing I'd owned before Ethan, was signed over entirely. The investment accounts had already been quietly restructured weeks earlier. Was it aggressive? Yes. Was it legal? Barely. Claire called it a gray zone with sharp edges. But Ethan had opened the door. Saturday morning, my phone lit up with an unknown number. "This is Ethan, you blocked me?" Really mature. I hadn't blocked him, just muted him. I didn't correct him. "My lawyer says we need full asset disclosure by Monday," I replied once. "Have your lawyer contact my lawyer." I sent Claire's firm details. There was a long pause. Then, "You got a lawyer?" This was supposed to be amicable. "You ended a 7-year relationship via text message," I typed. Not sure what part of that suggested amicable. Silence. Monday came. Then Tuesday. Claire sent everything. Every document, every transfer, every signature. By Wednesday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. "What did you do?" "You can't do this. This is fraud. I'm calling the police." I didn't respond. At 7:02 p.m., someone started pounding on my door. Not knocking. Pounding. I checked the camera. Ethan, red-faced, hair disheveled, yelling my name like volume could undo paperwork. "Open the door, Alex!" I called Claire. "He's here." "Do not open it," she said calmly. "If he doesn't leave in 5 minutes, call the police." I sat on the couch and watched. He screamed, then cried, then sat down on the steps with his head in his hands. I felt nothing. After 20 minutes, he left. The next afternoon, he came back calmer. I opened the door, but kept the chain on. "This is insane," he said. "You can't just give everything away." "It's not everything," I replied. "It's what I built. I'm your partner. You sent the breakup text." His voice cracked. "I made a mistake." "Then you should have used your words instead of legal paperwork." The court date came fast. And for the first time since that text message, I saw fear in his eyes. By the time the court date was scheduled, Ethan stopped pretending this was about freedom. It became about numbers. That's what happens when someone has been living inside your life like it's a hotel, room service, fresh towels, someone else picking up the bill, and suddenly the card on file gets declined. He started calling from different numbers, texting from apps, leaving voicemails that shifted tone every 20 minutes, like he was cycling through personalities trying to find the one that still worked on me. First it was anger. "You're a psychopath, Alex. No normal person does this." Then it was bargaining. "We can fix this. I didn't mean it like that." Then the soft, wounded version. "I can't believe you'd leave me with nothing." That one almost made me laugh. Almost. Because Ethan wasn't left with nothing. He still had the SUV, technically in his name. He still had the credit cards I hadn't canceled yet, and whatever was sitting in his personal checking account that he'd always kept just in case. But the truth was simpler than his dramatic messages. He didn't want a life. He wanted my life. And now that it was slipping, his panic was turning him reckless. On Sunday night, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I recognized immediately. His best friend, Derek. "Hey, Ethan's spiraling. Can you just talk to him?" I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Derek wasn't a bad guy. He'd been around for years, always polite, always careful not to get involved. But men like Derek, men who stand beside men like Ethan, often tell themselves they're neutral. Neutrality is just loyalty with better PR. I didn't reply. Monday morning, Claire called me while I was walking into the office. "They filed an emergency motion," she said. "To freeze assets?" I asked. "To freeze, reverse, and accuse you of acting in bad faith." I didn't stop walking. "What are our odds?" Claire gave a small sigh, the kind of sigh that meant she was switching from sister to attorney. "Depends on the judge. Timing matters." The breakup text matters. His lack of contribution matters. And the trust? It's going to look suspicious, she admitted. But suspicious isn't illegal. It's just loud. Loud. That was the right word. Protecting myself had never been a quiet act. Not for a woman. When a man does something strategic, he's smart. When a woman does it, she's cold, vindictive, a monster. I could already hear Ethan's lawyer building that story. I kept my voice calm anyway. Let them argue, I said. We'll bring receipts. Claire paused, then said quietly, Good, because I have a feeling Ethan isn't done embarrassing himself yet. She was right. That afternoon, I got an email from Ethan's lawyer requesting full discovery, 5 years of statements, deeds, titles, transaction histories. The subject line alone felt like a threat. Formal request for financial disclosure. I forwarded it to Claire. She responded within 3 minutes. Already preparing the packet. Let them see everything. At 6:48 p.m., just as I was pouring a glass of water in my kitchen, the pounding started again. I froze. The sound wasn't like yesterday. This was louder, faster, more frantic, like he was trying to break through the door with his hands. I checked the camera. Ethan wasn't alone. A woman stood behind him. Tall, glossy hair, white coat, heels sharp enough to puncture tile. She looked like she belonged in a luxury condo lobby, not my porch. Ethan leaned toward the camera and snarled like he knew I was watching. Open the door. The woman behind him tilted her head, smiling slightly, like she was enjoying the show. My stomach tightened. I called Claire. He's here again, I said, and he brought someone. Describe her, Claire said instantly. I did. There was a beat of silence. Then Claire's voice lowered. That might be his girlfriend. My chest went cold. His what? Alex, remember the California conference? The sudden distance? The phone angle? People don't usually leave like that without somewhere to land. I stared at the screen showing Ethan's face, red, furious, determined. The woman behind him stepped forward, close enough that the camera caught her expression clearly. She mouthed something at the door. Even without audio, I could read her lips. Don't be difficult. Something in me snapped into focus so hard it felt like clarity hurt. Not heartbreak, not jealousy, disgust. Because Ethan hadn't just tried to leave. He tried to replace me. And he brought the replacement to my doorstep like a witness. He pounded again, then shouted, You think you're smart? You think you can just steal my future? I didn't move. I watched. The woman leaned in and said something to him. He nodded, then stepped back dramatically, as if preparing for a performance. He raised his voice so the whole street could hear. Alex, you can't hide everything. This is fraud. You're going to get destroyed in court. I called the police. Not to threaten him, not to scare him, because I wasn't going to let Ethan turn my home into a stage. While I waited, I sat on my couch, staring at the camera feed. Ethan paced. The woman, his new woman, stood with her arms crossed, calm and smug, like she'd done this before. And then Ethan did something that made my blood turn to ice. He pointed at my door and yelled, She hit me! She's violent! She's been threatening me for months! My entire body went still. Because I understood what he was doing. He was planting a narrative, creating a record, a story. So if the court didn't give him money, he'd try to take something else. My reputation, my career, my peace. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman. Ethan instantly changed tone, shoulders slumped, voice softer, helpless. I'm just trying to get my things, he said. She's locking me out and hiding money. The female officer glanced at the door, then at the camera mounted above it. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Ma'am, she called out, are you inside? I stepped close enough to speak through the door. Yes. Do you feel safe? Yes. Do you want him trespassed? The word hit the air like a gavel. Trespassed. Ethan's head snapped up. He looked at the camera like he couldn't believe I'd let it get this far. The woman behind him rolled her eyes. Subtle, but clear. Ethan lifted his hands. Come on, he said, voice rising again. This is insane. I lived here. And you left, I said, calm, by choice. The male officer spoke now. Sir, if your name isn't on the property and you don't have permission to be here, you need to leave. Ethan's face twisted. I'm her partner. Not legally, I said. The new woman's lips pressed together. For the first time, her confidence cracked. Just a hairline fracture. Because she realized she wasn't watching a man stand up for himself. She was watching a man get removed like a problem. Ethan stepped forward again, rage flaring. This isn't over, he hissed toward the door. You're going to regret this. I didn't answer. Because regret was something you felt when you'd done the wrong thing. And for the first time in months, I knew I hadn't. He left with the officers watching. The woman followed, heels clicking like punctuation. And the moment they disappeared down the sidewalk, I sat back on my couch, hands shaking. Not from fear, from the delayed realization that this was only the beginning. Because Ethan wasn't just losing money, he was losing control. And men like Ethan don't accept loss quietly. They escalate. Claire called 10 minutes later. They served the motion officially, she said. Emergency hearing is set for next Wednesday. I closed my eyes. Okay. You'll need to be there. I will. And Alex, Claire added, voice gentler now. Whatever he's trying to do with this violence narrative, document everything. Save the ring footage. Save every message. I swallowed. I already am. There was a pause. Then Claire said softly, Good, because I want the judge to see who he really is. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I missed Ethan, but because my mind kept replaying one thing. Not the pounding, not the screaming, not the new woman's smile. The moment Ethan shouted, She hit me, a lie designed to destroy me. And suddenly the breakup text wasn't the cruelest thing he'd done. It was just the first move. The courtroom smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a dull, unforgiving glow, the kind that made people look exactly as tired, anxious, or desperate as they felt. I sat beside Claire on a narrow wooden bench, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I was calm, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I'd already lived through the worst part. The surprise, the betrayal. The moment you realize the person you trusted is capable of lying about you without blinking. Everything after that is just process. Ethan arrived 10 minutes late. He wore a black suit that didn't quite fit right, too tight across the shoulders, sleeves a little short, like he'd borrowed it or bought it in a hurry. Beside him was his lawyer, Mitchell Reeves. Expensive haircut, perfect teeth, the kind of man who charged by the hour and spoke like every sentence was a performance. Ethan didn't look at me, not once. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, like if he turned his head, he might lose control. The judge entered. Judge Eleanor Whitman, early 60s. Silver hair pulled back, eyes sharp with the practiced impatience of someone who had seen every version of human nonsense. We all stood, then sat. Reeves went first. Of course he did. He stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and launched into a speech so polished it felt rehearsed in front of a mirror. He called me vindictive, calculated, accused me of deliberately hiding assets to financially cripple my partner. He described Ethan as emotionally vulnerable, as someone who had sacrificed his own career to support mine, as a man blindsided by a woman who weaponized her financial expertise. I watched Ethan out of the corner of my eye. He nodded at the right moments, lowered his gaze when Reeves mentioned emotional abuse, played his role well. Then Reeves said it. My client was afraid, he told the court. Afraid not only of losing everything he helped build, but of the woman he lived with. I felt Claire stiffen beside me. Reeves continued smoothly. There are documented claims of volatility, threats, even physical intimidation. He paused, letting the implication hang. This trust was not protection, it was punishment. When he sat down, the room felt heavier. Judge Whitman turned to Claire. Ms. Hayes's counsel, she said. Your response. Claire stood. No dramatics, no raised voice. She reached into her folder and pulled out her phone. Your Honor, she said calmly, I'd like to begin by reading a message sent by Mr. Carter to my client. She cleared her throat. At 2:07 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, while Ms. Hayes was at work, she received the following text message. Claire read it aloud. I'm starting the breakup process. You're holding me back from the life I deserve. She let silence settle. Then she continued. This message was sent from Mr. Carter while he was physically present at his lawyer's office. There was no prior discussion, no warning, no attempt at resolution. Claire looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Carter initiated the dissolution of this relationship unilaterally. She set the phone down and reached for another document. Now let's talk about contribution. She handed the judge a stack of statements. For the past 18 months, Mr. Carter's financial contribution to shared expenses was zero. Reeves shifted in his seat. Claire didn't look at him. My client's post-tax income during that same period was approximately $340,000. She paused. The house, the vehicles, the savings, these were funded entirely by Ms. Hayes' income while Mr. Carter pursued personal interests. Judge Whitman flipped through the papers slowly. Claire went on. The trust in question was created after Mr. Carter announced the breakup, but before any legal papers were served. At that moment, Mrs. Hayes was still legally free to manage her assets. Reeves stood abruptly. Objection. This is a clear attempt to circumvent. Judge Whitman raised a hand. I'll decide what it is, Mr. Reeves. Her gaze returned to the documents, then to Ethan. Mr. Carter, she said, Did you send this message? His voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. And did you intend to end the relationship when you sent it? He hesitated. I was emotional. Yes or no? The judge said flatly. Yes. She leaned back slightly. And after sending this message, did you continue to use Ms. Hayes' financial resources? Ethan swallowed. Yes. The room was quiet again. Judge Whitman turned to me. Ms. Hayes, she said, did you create this trust to hide assets from your partner? I stood. My intention was to protect what I built, I said evenly, from someone who chose to leave without discussion and then demanded half of everything afterward. The judge studied me for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. Here's the problem, she said. Ms. Hayes, your timing is convenient. My stomach tightened. You moved quickly. That suggests preparation. Then she turned to Ethan. But Mr. Carter, you don't get to detonate a relationship and then claim victimhood when the other person responds. She looked back down at the paperwork. I'm going to split the difference. My heart started pounding. The trust stands, she said. Ms. Hayes acted within her legal rights, even if the ethics are debatable. Reeves opened his mouth. The judge cut him off. However, she continued, Mr. Carter is entitled to compensation for his non-financial contribution to the relationship. Ethan looked up sharply. I held my breath. Ms. Hayes will pay Mr. Carter a one-time settlement of $150,000. Ethan exhaled loudly, half relief, half disbelief. That represents approximately 7% of the total assets in question, the judge added. Given Mr. Carter's lack of financial contribution and the manner in which he initiated this breakup, I consider this more than fair. Reeves started to object again. Judge Whitman's voice hardened. Mr. Reeves, your client sent a text message accusing his partner of holding him back from the life he deserves. She met Ethan's eyes directly. He is free to pursue that life. She paused. And now he has $150,000 to help him do it. Gavel down. Ruling stands. The sound echoed louder than I expected. In the hallway outside, Ethan finally lost control. You ruined my life, he shouted, voice cracking. That's nothing. That's nothing. Claire stepped between us. An appeal would cost you at least $50,000, she said calmly, with very low odds of success. Ethan went pale. He stared at her, then at me. And in that moment, I saw it. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Fear. Because he finally understood something he'd avoided for years. He wasn't losing me. He was losing the illusion that I would always save him. Ethan lost it in the parking lot. Not quietly, not with dignity. He yelled that the judge was biased, that Claire had manipulated the court, that I'd turned cold and destroyed everything we had. I didn't respond, because the truth was simpler than his narrative. Everything we had was built on my stability, and once that was gone, there was nothing left to destroy. 2 weeks later, the breakup was finalized. I wrote Ethan a check for $150,000. He cashed it the same day. The house stayed in the trust. The account stayed protected. The SUV, technically in his name, was his. For a brief moment, I wondered if that money would give him the fresh start he kept talking about. It didn't. I found out what really happened through people we both knew. Friends who didn't pick sides so much as observe fallout. There was a woman. Of course there was. Her name was Lila. She was the one from the porch. They'd met at that California wellness conference, the same one Ethan came back from suddenly awakened, talking about masculine energy and alignment and stepping into abundance. She called herself a brand strategist, drove a leased Porsche, posted motivational quotes every morning, talked about entrepreneurship like it was a personality trait. Ethan moved in with her less than 2 weeks after the breakup was finalized. By week 3, she was encouraging him to invest in himself. By week 5, he'd given her $40,000 of his settlement money to help launch her next venture. It was supposed to be a supplement company. Turns out it was an MLM. By week 7, Lila disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. She moved to Austin, blocked him everywhere. And just like that, Ethan learned the difference between being chosen and being useful. That's when the messages started. Long ones, apologetic ones. He said he'd been manipulated, that he'd confused excitement with happiness, that he finally understood how good he'd had it with me. He asked if we could talk. Maybe clear the air, maybe see if there was anything left. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because I finally understood something Ethan never had. Closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision. A week later, Claire dissolved the trust. Everything transferred back to me. House, investments, accounts. It cost another $15,000 in legal fees. Still worth it. The silence afterward was strange. No pounding on the door, no texts, no threats. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something else. Ethan hadn't wanted freedom. He wanted an upgrade without paying the cost. And when that fantasy collapsed, all he had left was the truth he'd been avoiding. Independence requires responsibility. And responsibility had never been his strength. It's been 3 months since everything finalized. Long enough for the shock to fade. Long enough for the anger to lose its edge. Long enough to see the story clearly, without the distortion of hope. Ethan moved back in with his parents. Different state, different life. Last I heard, he'd picked up contract work through a small marketing firm, making about $45,000 a year. He sold the SUV. Apparently, reality gets expensive when no one else is footing the bill. As for me, I stayed. Same firm, same office. A month after the court ruling, I got another promotion. Senior Vice President. I remember sitting in my car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, feeling something unexpected. Not triumph, relief. Because for the first time in a long time, my success didn't feel like it came with an emotional tax. I dated briefly, nothing serious. Just enough to remember what it feels like to sit across from someone who has their own ambitions, their own income, their own life. Someone who doesn't see partnership as a retirement plan. My parents asked me once if I was bitter. I thought about it before answering. No, I said, I'm just careful now. Careful with trust. Careful with promises. Careful with the quiet signs people ignore when love feels comfortable. Because the truth is, I knew. 6 months before Ethan sent that text, something in me knew. The distance, the entitlement, the way my success started to feel like a burden to him instead of a shared win. I just didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to be the woman who invested years into someone who saw her as a wallet with a heartbeat. But knowing now doesn't hurt the way it used to. It sharpens. People ask if I'd do anything differently. I would have trusted my instincts earlier. I would have asked harder questions, set firmer boundaries, refused to confuse potential with partnership. Because love isn't about who's exciting when life is easy. It's about who stays accountable when life is stable. The house still feels quiet sometimes. I've thought about selling it, getting something smaller, something that doesn't feel like a monument to a relationship that only worked as long as I carried it. Or maybe I'll get a dog. Something that shows up every day because it wants to, not because it needs something from me. The lesson I took from all of this isn't about money. It's about alignment, about choosing someone who wants to build with you, not live off you, and about understanding that walking away isn't always a failure. Sometimes, it's the most self-respecting decision you'll ever make.